So last night, of course, was a big episode of Impact Wrestling on AXS TV as we get closer and closer to Slammiversary. But before we get to Slammiversary in July, of course, we've got Against All Odds on Saturday, just 1 day away now. It's tomorrow night, live on pay-per-view. We will be doing a watch-along and post-show reaction stream for the entirety of Against All Odds. So be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, click the notification bell. You'll be notified when we go live for the watch-along tomorrow night and for the post-show reaction stream as well. But we got an update when it comes to the main event for Against All Odds, and it certainly is surprising because, frankly, it's an outcome that I'm not sure that a lot of people saw coming. I'll be very open. I didn't see it coming. I was convinced, absolutely convinced, we were going to see a main event at Against All Odds that was a triple threat match. That was Kenny Omega defending the Impact World Championship against Moose and Sami Callihan. But we're not getting that. We're getting something... Well, that was, I guess, initially planned, but we've got a different location. We've got a stipulation as well. We know one half, at least, of the outcome for Slammiversary as well. So it was huge. It was huge. And this was all decided in the much anticipated and hyped up Impact and AEW Summit. That was on last night's Impact Wrestling on AXS TV. Now, last night on Impact Wrestling on AXS TV, it was announced that Kenny Omega will put his Impact World Championship on the line against Moose Against All Odds, which was the plan, but instead of it taking place inside of the Impact Zone, it's going to take place at Daly's Place, the home of All Elite Wrestling, this Saturday at Against All Odds on pay-per-view. Now, during the summit, the president of AEW, Tony Khan, and the executive vice president of Impact Wrestling, Scott D'Amore, informed Omega's manager and still the kayfabe executive vice president of Impact Wrestling, Don Callis, that Omega and Moose's matchup this Saturday will be taking place in Jacksonville, Florida, but there is also an additional stipulation added. Whoever comes out of Against All Odds as the Impact World Champion on Saturday will face Sami Callihan at Slammiversary for the Impact World Championship on Saturday, July 17. Now, of course, Sami Callihan is a former Impact World Champion. He won the championship from Brian Cage on October 25th, 2019. He held the championship for approximately 79 days. Before he lost it to Tessa Blanchard. He became the first woman in company history to win the World Championship at Hard to Kill on January 12, 2020. Now, until then, which we'll touch on in a second, Sami Callihan will join forces with Tommy Dreamer against the Good Brothers. We'll touch on this in a second. This was made just minutes after the Impact and AEW Summit. So, I mean, huge, really. And like I mentioned, I didn't see that coming. I really didn't see that coming. I thought, and again, I did the video yesterday, so you would know, it's there to see. I thought the most likely situation that we were going to see on Impact Wrestling is that it moves to a triple threat match. It would be Omega, Callihan, Moose at Against All Odds. Then that would essentially move the Moose and Kenny Omega match to Slammiversary, and that's maybe, even though I still think Kenny Omega could hold on to the Impact World Championship for a little while longer yet, that is what maybe where Omega drops the championship to Moose at Slammiversary, but we're not getting that. We're not getting that. Instead, Sami Callihan is going to be in the main event of Slammiversary challenging for the Impact World Championship, which is surprising, and we'll touch on that in a second, but also, the Against All Odds main event tomorrow night on pay-per-view will now be taking place inside Daly's Place in Jacksonville, Florida, the home of AEW. And, I mean, very, very surprising. Feels like a big deal. Certainly going to have people tuning in. We're going to be tuning in, so certainly going to have people tuning in. As far as the segment itself, so I think there's a couple of different ways to break this down. Let's break down the segment first. Let's break down the ramifications of it. Let's break down what it means for Against All Odds, what it means for Slammiversary, because there's so much to dive into when it comes to this segment. First of all, the segment itself. Tony Khan will obviously get a lot of discussion in this segment because I did think at points he came across a little stiff. To be honest, I think he's someone that obviously has no pro wrestling experience in terms of delivering promos, in terms of being a character. Now, obviously, people will then say, well, why on earth is he portraying a character? Why on earth is he doing promos and stuff like that? Most of the time when it comes to AEW, he doesn't. And I think he knows that's because it's not his strong suit. I would assume, and this is just speculation on my point, but I would assume that maybe Impact Wrestling are kind of giving Tony the bit of the shove to become maybe a character or at least represent AEW in terms of stories whenever they do this AEW and Impact Wrestling storytelling. I think that's kind of the implication that I'm kind of getting from this because let's face it, he was very wooden and he was a bit stiff last night and he came out with the sunglasses sunglasses on. And I saw that Vince Russo on social media posted a screenshot of Tony Khan and said, "Hey TK, what on earth is this kind of look?" Because it's a picture of TK and he's got the sunglasses on, the frizzy hair. Bear in mind, I would say, now I partially agree that maybe it wasn't the best look for Tony Khan, but bear in mind this is the same Vince Russo that would regularly come out wearing, was it a New York Giants or a New York Yankees jersey, wearing a backwards baseball cap, and while he was the powers that be for WCW, and he would wrestle in a sleeveless shirt showing those big Russo guns, right? So again, people in glass houses, I think that's probably the best way to look at that one. But yeah, I think Tony Khan did fine. It did feel like when Tony Khan was delivering his lines during the promo, during the important bits, that they had kind of cut around it. Because you notice when Tony Khan came out, walked to the ring, was very, we talk about social distance, but was very far away from Scott D'Amore. Scott D'Amore was basically in the middle of the ring, and Tony Khan was kind of just back up against one of the ropes. It was, again, it just felt a bit awkward, that kind of stuff. And they talk through the situation. They talk through Kenny Omega winning the World Championship, them working in agreement with each other because he's the AEW World Champion and the Impact World Champion, all this kind of stuff. They mentioned that Don Callis isn't there. Don Callis shows up and basically puts across these very convincing points that Sami Callihan is blackballed from pretty much every other pro wrestling company in the world, and that Tony Khan doesn't want him in AEW. Tony Khan doesn't want him representing AEW, which again, I don't really understand. Because if Sami Callihan beat Kenny Omega, he wins the Impact World Championship. It's not a case of Sami Callihan beating Kenny Omega and becoming the AEW champion. And it's not a case of, because Sami Callihan's feuding with Kenny Omega, that means he's going to be on AEW television, because all of Kenny Omega's Impact Wrestling feuds have not crossed over into AEW television at all. So I don't really get that kind of logic. Maybe I'm missing something there, but that just seems a little bit odd and redundant. Anyways, Don Callis is saying that he's blackballed. He says that on my first night in the company, he smashed a baseball bat into Eddie Edwards' face, nearly ruined a great professional wrestling career. He's been, we call it, Callahan-isms, when he does all of these mistakes and gets in all of these troubles. He's not right to be a world champion, or he shouldn't be facing Kenny Omega, and you don't want that, Tony Khan. Tony Khan doesn't want that, and Tony Khan says, no, I don't want that. And again, it's like this implication that Sami Callihan's going to challenge for the AEW World Championship, which isn't the case. He would be challenging for the Impact World Championship. Again, I don't really get the logic there. I don't understand the logic in that one. Nevertheless, they agree, and Don Callis goes, right, see, we all agree on that. Right, I'll leave. So he goes to leave, and then you see Scott D'Amore whispering to Tony Khan, and Tony Khan's agreeing and nodding, and they do the announcement that this Saturday's main event will take place in Daly's Place in Jacksonville, Florida, the home of All Elite Wrestling, and the winner will face Sami Callihan at Slammiversary. So, again, Tony Khan's performance a bit wooden. It is what it is. Again, that's not his strength, and again, I know people on social media look at Tony Khan and they'll look at his performance in this promo, in this segment, and they're desperate. They're desperate to say, see, he's trying to put himself over, or he's trying to make himself this big character. He's trying to do this. He's trying to be cool. He looked very uncomfortable out there. I don't think this is a guy like Herb Abrams who's going out there, juicing himself and then being Mr. Electricity and all this kind of stuff. I don't think that's the case. I think Impact Wrestling genuinely, and I might be wrong here, but I think Impact Wrestling genuinely like having Tony Khan on their programming, because as part of this AEW and Impact Wrestling working relationship, they've got Kenny Omega out of it, and they've had appearances from Matt Hardy and Private Party, but, they probably want more. They want more AEW on their programming, because they've seen in the past, having Kenny Omega on that debut episode did a good number for them. So I think they want Tony Khan on their programming. They want Tony Khan to cut promos. They know that if they have Tony Khan cut a promo in the ring, whether it's good or bad, people are going to talk about it in videos like this or on social media, whether it's people criticizing Tony Khan or people criticizing Impact or AEW or this working relationship. It means people are talking about Impact Wrestling on AXS TV, which for a while they weren't. And considering that AXS TV, not a lot of people have, and not a lot of people watch it or have it on their systems or whatever, people like having Tony Khan, Impact like having Tony Khan on the program, because again, it gets people talking about him, gets them watching their YouTube highlights, it gets them watching their Twitch stream, whatever it is, they like that. And it makes it feel like a more important event. Frankly, that segment last night had the Executive Vice President of Impact Wrestling, Scott D'Amore, I guess technically in storyline, the Executive Vice President of Impact, Don Callis, and Tony Khan, the President, CEO, Creative Controller, whatever you want to call him, of AEW all in the same ring. That's a big deal. That's a big deal to pro wrestling fans. It feels like a big moment. And the storyline is that whilst Kenny Omega is the champion of both companies, they've come to an agreement, and they mentioned it going into Rebellion, that they would negotiate and figure out all of these working relationships and figure out all of these commitments that he had as the Impact and AEW World Champion. And that's what they did in this segment. They figured all that kind of stuff out. So I didn't really have a problem with the segment. Look, could it have probably been better? Maybe Tony Khan's performance could have been better, but frankly, again, all of the promos that he's done have been pre-taped. It's very obvious when you actually have him, even this I know was taped, but when you have him in front of the camera inside of the ring, whether it's on AEW Dark Elevation or on Impact last night, he's obviously not very comfortable. That's why he doesn't want to be a character, but I think Impact Wrestling do, because it gives their program some credibility. That's realistically what I think. I think the situation is there. As far as when it comes to Daily's place tomorrow night, I think it makes Against All Odds certainly more watchable for people that maybe weren't considering watching it. They're interested in seeing the Impact World Championship be defended by an AEW wrestler inside of an AEW ring. I think that's a compelling story to tell. I think it opens up the possibility of maybe, just maybe, some AEW interference there. We've been speaking about this whole working relationship between AEW and Impact Wrestling, and that's AEW probably need to do more in terms of promoting Impact Wrestling, and they haven't. They've barely acknowledged it on AEW television. Now, this is still technically an Impact broadcast tomorrow night, but having it inside Daily's place, inside of an AEW ring, does that eventually lead to have maybe some AEW interference? If there's some AEW interference, I'm thinking maybe the Young Bucks. If the Young Bucks, because it would be in Jacksonville, if the Young Bucks get involved, does that eventually lead to the Young Bucks coming back to Impact Wrestling? Generation Me, Max and Jeremy Buck coming back? That's a possibility as well. Because the way they've tried to frame this is that while the Good Brothers will be facing off against Sami Callihan and Tommy Dreamer inside of the Impact Zone inside of Nashville, they therefore can't get involved because they can't be in two places at once, essentially. They can't be in Florida while they're in Nashville, so this prevents the Good Brothers getting involved like they have done previously. The issue is that the Good Brothers aren't the only people inside that faction. Other people inside that faction are the Young Bucks. So I think there's a possibility. I think there's a real possibility that Omega uses the Young Bucks to maybe retain the championship at Against All Odds. I never felt that the championship was going to change hands at Against All Odds anyway. I always felt that if the title was going to change hands this early, I think it would be Slammiversary, because it's live and also because it's going to have fans in attendance. It's a big tentpole event for Impact Wrestling anyway, so it makes sense for the title to change hands at that point. Never thought it was going to change hands in Jacksonville, and I don't think it is now. The interesting thing is, as I mentioned, is Sami Callihan is now in the main event of Slammiversary. What does that do for Moose? Because the reason I thought Moose was going to be moved to Slammiversary is because the impression was that he has re-signed, or is at least close to re-signing, or will eventually re-sign with Impact Wrestling. Now, I don't think he wins tomorrow Against All Odds, but he's not in the main event of Slammiversary. He's not competing for the World Championship. Part of his tweet, which got a lot of people talking in the first place, was, I want to win the Impact World Championship before my contract expires in June. Well, I don't think he's going to win it at Against All Odds. Now people are going to say, wow, if he's not in the main event of Slammiversary and he's not going to win the Impact World Championship before his contract expires, does that mean that Moose is leaving Impact Wrestling? Does that mean his contract is set to expire? What does this mean? Personally, I don't think we have anything to worry about in terms of Moose leaving Impact. I think in reality, we're looking at a situation where Kenny Omega retains tomorrow, probably because of the Young Bucks or some AEW interference, I think. That then sets up the eventual triple threat match at Slammiversary. I think that's maybe the avenue we go down. The triple threat match we thought we were going to get at Against All Odds, we could possibly get it at Slammiversary instead. Now, people will say, well, they've only announced Sami Callihan. Sami Callihan's going to face the winner. What if, and this is an Impact kind of finish, what if there isn't a winner? What if there isn't a winner at Against All Odds? Maybe Moose has Kenny Omega beat tomorrow night. Hits his spear, or does this unbelievable move, hits the C4 off the top rope like he did before, Spanish Fly, has Kenny Omega beat, and out come the Young Bucks, attack Moose, get a disqualification finish, which AEW doesn't really like doing, but Impact don't have a problem doing that kind of thing. So we get a no contest, a disqualification, whatever. The Young Bucks help Kenny Omega retain his championship or leave with his championship. And once again, the Elite control both AEW and Impact Wrestling. And then it's decided, look, once again, and maybe this is where Don Callis comes into it, once again, you took precedence, you took the side of your client over your company, you're still an executive with the company, because of this egregious abuse of power, because you continually take the side of Kenny Omega, because you can now no longer be impartial, we've fired you from being an executive with the company. I've spoke to the Anthem board of directors. You're fired as an executive with the company. You're still Kenny Omega's manager. Oh, and by the way, at Slammiversary now, it's not only going to be Kenny Omega versus Sami Callihan, it's going to be Kenny Omega versus Sami Callihan versus Moose, triple threat match, Impact World Championship. And maybe the Young Bucks also compete on at Slammiversary as to who they face off against. That's a good answer. It's anyone. The Motor City Machine Guns. Why not, right? Maybe I haven't seen Alex Shelley. You haven't seen Alex Shelley since Hard to Kill, or just before Hard to Kill, where he was scheduled to be part of that Hard to Kill match. One of the Young Bucks' favorite matches in Impact Wrestling was when they faced off against the Motor City Machine Guns. Maybe they renew that rivalry. That's certainly a possibility as well. So there's a lot of moving parts. Slammiversary is difficult to predict right now, but what is very interesting and exciting is Against All Odds tomorrow with that main event in Daly's place. So very exciting. Now, speaking of Against All Odds, another thing I did want to talk about briefly, and I will be doing an Against All Odds predictions video at some point. I'm just deciding whether that goes up today or tomorrow, but we will be talking about that. As I mentioned earlier on, a new match has been announced for Against All Odds as well. On last night's episode of Impact, Scott DeBoer, Tony Khan announced that Sami Callihan will not be added to the Kenny Omega and Moose Championship match at Against All Odds. Instead, it was decided the two will battle out at Daly's place, with the winner going on to defend the championship against Callihan at Slammiversary on July 17. But not to be left out of the action at this weekend's event, Sami Callihan was announced for a tag team street fight against the Good Brothers, Doc Gallows and Carl Anderson. Now, they've been a thorn in Sami Callihan's side as of late, costing him the #1 contender match and last week versus Moose. Now, backstage, Sami Callihan was approached by Tommy Dreamer, who said that he's also had a problem with Don Callis. Callihan agreed to team up with his former adversary, I can never say that word, adversary, despite his willingness to fight alone. So this is all parts of the babyface turn, I guess, for Sami Callihan. Tommy Dreamer, it's a strange one, Tommy Dreamer, because I know for a fact there will be discussions about Tommy Dreamer, because he is part of the creative team. He is an influential figure. He's a producer. Even some people here on the channel have said that maybe Tommy Dreamer takes Don Callis' spot as the executive vice president of Impact Wrestling going forward. I don't know how legitimate that is, but it's interesting. But I know people will say, look at Tommy Dreamer. He's in a creative position, always puts himself in these positions, all this kind of stuff. Frankly, Tommy Dreamer has been added to this match. In my opinion, Tommy Dreamer has been added to this Street Fight Tag Team match for Against All Odds for one reason, and one reason only, is because he's taken the pinfall, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. I know people will say, well, isn't Sami Callihan next month, if he's going to be challenging for the World Championship, why should he be on the losing side of things? But let's face it here, the Good Brothers, all they've done in Impact Wrestling recently is lose. They've just been non-stop losses, whether it's losing to Finn Juice at Sacrifice, then losing once again at Rebellion, then losing at Under Siege with Carl Anderson, taking a pinfall. It feels like all the Good Brothers do over the last 3 or 4 major pay-per-view events for Impact Wrestling has been losing. And if they've got big plans for the Good Brothers at Slammiversary, which I assume they do, who against, I don't know, then they can't keep losing matches, right? They can't keep losing matches. So I think Tommy Dreamer's been added to that tag team street fight because, again, ECW, Tommy Dreamer, hardcore legend, all that kind of stuff. He fits into the street fight narrative, weapons, hardcore. They can do some brawling. They'll probably fight all over the Impact Zone and probably get some color as well, I would have thought. Definitely Sami Callihan, and he might get out some barbed wire and all that kind of stuff as well. But ultimately, I think Tommy Dreamer is there for one reason, and that is to take the pinfall. I think he's there to take the pinfall, whether it's the Magic Killer, Boot of Doom, whatever it is. He's going to take the pinfall, and it's going to actually give the Good Brothers some much-needed heat in Impact Wrestling, and maybe even continue the issue between Sami Callihan and the Good Brothers going forward. Now, as I mentioned, nobody involved in this match is going to be involved in the main event because that's in Jacksonville, in Daly's place. What I am interested in, and I don't know this, I am interested, just thinking out loud as we get towards the end of the video here, I am interested to think that, has this match between Kenny Omega and Moose, has it already been taped, or are we going to be going live from Daly's place for Jacksonville, for the Impact World Championship match from Jacksonville tomorrow night? Logic would suggest probably it's taped, and probably it was taped in front of 0 fans. I don't know. It's just going to be fascinating. And again, I'm very, very, very excited for Against All Odds tomorrow night. And we will be doing a watch-along on the channel and a post-show reaction stream, so be sure to join us there. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these Impact Wrestling news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.